Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, I want to try something a little bit different.
Yeah, let's do it.
Usually when we sit down with these stacks of research, we're looking at the world map in, the traditional sense. Borders, flags, trade deals.
Good guys versus bad guys.
Exactly. But the materials you've brought today,
Yeah.
it feels like they're asking us to just throw that map away.
Not throw it away, maybe.
Right.
Just look underneath it. Because if you only look at the map at the surface politics, you just see a lot of noise.
Right.
You see leaders shouting. You see tariffs, tension. But the sources for this deep dive, especially the GOA-14 series, they suggest we're looking at the wrong layer. We shouldn't be looking at the drivers. We need to be looking at the engines.
The engines. You mean governments themselves.
Even deeper, the operating systems,
Yeah.
the governance OS. The argument here is that the major powers, China, the US, the EU, Japan, they're all running on fundamentally different, hard-coded software.
And that's why everything feels so chaotic.
Yeah. It's not just bad decisions. It's because these operating systems are producing what the source calls asymmetric dysfunctions.
Asymmetric dysfunctions. That's a mouthful.
It is, but it's a really useful frame. It just means the world is breaking, but it's breaking in completely different ways depending on where you're standing.
And the scary part.
The scary part, or maybe just the fascinating part, is that none of these systems seem to have a stop button.
Okay, let's unpack this, because usually when we talk about systems breaking, we get into predictions, right? China's going to collapse next Tuesday, that kind of thing.
And the sources are really clear on this. We have to avoid that.
No predictions.
No predictions. And this is crucial for you listening. We're stripping away the moral judgment today. We are not asking which system is better or more virtuous.
We're just looking at the mechanics.
Purely mechanics, structural mechanics. Why does the machine make the decisions it makes, even when those decisions seem totally irrational from the outside?
So we're mechanics looking under the hood of a car that's already speeding down the highway.
Exactly. And we're starting with the biggest, most misunderstood engine on the road, China.
The narrative we always hear is that China is this monolith.
Yeah.
Top-down, authoritarian, Xi Jinping pushes a button and everyone marches in lockstep.
Right. But the research paints a much, much messier picture, more aggressive.
How so?
Well, the source material really challenges that idea of China as just an authoritarian exception. Instead, it frames China as a system suffering from runaway optimization.
Runaway optimization. What does that mean?
It's a machine that has become too successful at doing the one specific thing it was designed to do.
And that one thing is?
The promotion tournament.
The promotion tournament.
Uh-huh.
It sounds like a game show. But reading the description, it sounds absolutely terrifying.
It is incredibly stressful. To get China, you have to understand that the internal structure of the Communist Party isn't just a hierarchy. It's a competition, a fierce one.
Okay.
In a Western democracy, your right to rule, your legitimacy, comes from the vote. You win an election, you've got a mandate for 4 years.
Right. Even if the economy tanks, you're still the president until the next election cycle.
Precisely. But in the Chinese governance OS, legitimacy comes purely from continuous results. Economic growth, social stability, building things fast, that is the only currency that matters.
So if you're a local official,
Right.
say, the mayor of a city,
Yeah.
you can't just do a good job.
No. You have to beat the official in the next city over. It's a tournament. There are only so many spots for promotion. To move from local to provincial, you have to show your GDP numbers are higher, your bridges were built faster.
And your city is quieter than your rivals.
Exactly. It's a constant race.
But here's where I got stuck reading the notes. In a normal job, if I don't get promoted, fine. I stay in my role. I still get a paycheck. But the sources call this a survival condition.
Yeah.
That sounds extreme.
It is extreme, but it's structural. In this political OS, stopping or dropping out of the race is what they call political death.
Political death.
It's not just stalling your career. If you lose momentum, you lose your political cover, your network. You become vulnerable to, say, a correction purge. You effectively just cease to exist in the power structure.
So from a pure self-preservation standpoint,
Yeah.
an official simply cannot slow down.
Correct. Now, put yourself in their shoes. The economy is cooling off, there's a global downturn, but you need those numbers to go up to survive the next round of the tournament. What's the rational choice?
You cheat. You bend the rules.
You cheat the physics. You borrow huge amounts of money to build things that maybe aren't needed yet. You zone land for apartments no one is ready to buy. You just kick the problems down the road.
The debt, the environmental damage.
All of it. You just need to survive today's promotion round.
It reminds me of that movie Speed. You have to keep the bus above 50 miles per hour or the whole thing explodes.
That is the perfect analogy. And the source calls this a recursive structure because the winners, they go up to the provincial level, and what do they do there?
They demand even higher growth from the people below them.
Exactly, to justify their own next promotion.
It's a treadmill that speeds up every time you successfully complete a mile.
And this is the core of the asymmetric dysfunction. The system is structurally closed to options like deceleration or correction. If the party just said, hey, let's pause for a few years to fix the debt, the legitimacy, the blood of the system, it just drains away.
The engine stalls.
Hmm.
And because legitimacy is based on performance, not a vote, a stall is an existential threat.
Yes. So when we see China doubling down on exports, building solar panels at a rate the world can't possibly absorb,
It's not necessarily some grand strategic plan for global domination.
it might be framed that way. But structurally, it's a survival reflex. They just have to keep that machine running at full speed.
Which brings us to how this connects to the rest of the world. The notes talk about the world membrane.
Right. This is where the internal OS smacks into global reality. For decades, the world loved the output from this Chinese tournament. We got cheap TVs, fast supply chains, deflation. We just thought it was efficiency.
We didn't care that some mayor in Shenzhen was panicked about his career. We just liked the cheap phones.
Exactly. But what was structurally happening, the source argues, is that China was using this production to vomit internal tensions outward.
Wow. That is a visceral image.
But it's accurate, I think. To keep that internal promotion race running without completely overheating their own society, they had to dump the excess output somewhere. The global market became a pressure release valve for their internal engine.
But now that valve is closing. The U.S. is putting up tariffs. Europe's investigating subsidies. The whole world is slowing down.
And that's the nonlinear shock, because the Chinese system cannot absorb a slowdown internally. Remember, slowdown is political death. It has to transfer that friction to the rest of the world.
It just pushes the exports even harder.
It becomes an amplifier of global stress.
So if China can't stop, the global supply chains are sort of locked into that race with it. We're all hitched to an engine with no brakes.
Precisely. But, and this is the pivot in the research that I found really interesting, we can't just point the finger at China. Oh.
Because the U.S. is running a very, very similar race.
No, hang on. Usually we frame the U.S. and China as complete opposites. Freedom versus control. Democracy versus autocracy. How are they running the same race?
On the surface, sure, the user interface of politics is totally different. But if you look at the operating system, specifically on this one point of stopping, they're almost identical.
Okay, you're going to have to walk me through that one.
Let's go back to the survival condition. In China, the party structure dies if the promotion race stops.
Right.
In the U.S., what happens if the market principle stops?
The market principle. You mean just capitalism?
More specific, I mean the mechanism of capital efficiency, growth, return on investment, the velocity of money. The whole U.S. system is designed to maximize that above all else. If the market stops growing, if capital starts flowing,
the economy collapses. And if the economy collapses, the political order gets very unstable very fast.
there you go. So the Chinese official can't say, let's take a break, and the U.S. market can't say, let's make less profit this quarter to be better for the community. Both are runaway optimizations.
Exactly. Neither system has a brake pedal.
Okay.
But the sources note this fascinating shift happening in the U.S. right now, kind of a patch update to the U.S.
This is the boundary manager idea, right?
Yes, from GOA-12. For the last 40 years, the U.S. government acted more like a market manager. Its main job was just to keep the lights on for the stock market, keep regulations low, keep trade open.
But that's changing.
It has to. Because the U.S. is realizing that the market OS, when it's just left to its own devices, is starting to eat the very society that hosts it.
Can you give me an example? Eating society sounds a bit abstract.
The housing market. The source points to the Blackstone model. Huge institutional investors buying up thousands of single-family homes just to rent them out.
Right.
From a pure market OS perspective, that is extremely efficient. It maximizes capital return. It's smart.
But for a family trying to buy their first home, it's a complete disaster.
Exactly. It destroys the social fabric. It prevents wealth building. So you have a system that is efficiently destroying the stability of its own population.
So the government has to step in.
The state is shifting to become a boundary manager.
Right.
Imagine the market is a tiger. You can't kill the tiger. You need the economy. You can't really tame it. But what you can do is build a fence around it.
So things like tariffs, antitrust laws, chip export controls, Those are the fences.
There are attempts at fences, yeah. The U.S. is trying to contain this world membrane rupture from its own side. It's realizing that if inequality gets too high or supply chains get too fragile, the whole game could end.
So let me try to summarize the asymmetry. China is flooring it because the driver dies if they slow down.
Yep.
And the U.S. is frantically trying to build a fence around the racetrack to keep the car from crashing into the crowd.
That is a perfect visualization.
But the world isn't just these two giants. And this is where the sources really provide a complete map, I think, because there are systems that have managed to stop, or at least they're not accelerating.
The EU and Japan, and this is so critical, they aren't just weaker versions of the US or China, they're running completely different operating systems.
Let's start with the EU, because it's either seen as a regulatory paradise or a bureaucratic nightmare.
The source defines the EU's OS as norms and consensus. It was designed specifically to prevent the kind of conflict that destroyed Europe. It values process over speed.
So it's the structural opposite of China's promotion tournament.
Completely. But its dysfunction is overbreaking. It has so many checks, balances, and veto points that it risks paralysis. The source argues it values the rightness of a decision more than the timeliness of it.
Like holding a 6-month committee meeting on the perfect way to hold a fire hose while the building is burning down.
That's a bit harsh, but structurally, yeah. When a crisis hits that needs a fast, unified decision like a war or the AI revolution, the EUOS can get stuck in a processing loop. It can't operate in event time.
Safe but stationary. And then there's Japan.
And the way the sources talk about Japan is almost haunting. They call it a quiet hollowing out.
It's fascinating because Japan was the China of the 1980s, right? Everyone thought they were going to take over the world. Yeah.
And then they stopped. But they didn't collapse. And that's the key. Japan's OS is described as inertia and harmony. Structurally, they stopped growing in that hyperspeed way decades ago.
So they're just coasting.
They're coasting on a huge amount of accumulated wealth and social capital. It's like an engine that's been turned off, but the car is so heavy and smooth that it just keeps rolling silently down the highway.
That almost sounds pleasant.
It avoids the violent acceleration of China and the brutal inequality of the U.S., sure, but the dysfunction is that it's a slow, quiet erosion. The population is shrinking, rural areas are emptying out. Problems aren't solved, they're just absorbed by the social fabric until that fabric wears thin.
So let's look at the whole map. We have 4 completely different types of broken.
Let's recap. 1. China. Cannot stop. An explosive rupture risk.
2. The U.S. Trying to find a break without killing the engine. Risk of internal social erosion.
3. The EU. Stop by design. Risk of paralysis and becoming irrelevant.
And 4. Japan. Coasting on momentum. Risk of a quiet hollowing out.
When you lay it out like that, it suddenly makes sense why the world feels so chaotic. It's not just people disagreeing, it's that these machines are fundamentally incompatible.
That's the real takeaway, isn't it? The chaos isn't just bad leadership, it's structural friction. These 4 operating systems grinding against each other.
The gears are stripping. Think about it. When a system that must accelerate, like China, hits a system designed to brake, like the EU, you get massive friction. When a system that prioritizes market efficiency, the U.S., tries to decouple from a system that prioritizes political survival, China, you get sparks.
And the really scary part, which the sources keep emphasizing, is that this isn't necessarily about malice. This isn't some villain's master plan.
No, that's the tragedy of optimization. These systems just optimize themselves into a corner. They got so good at their one-thing growth, markets, consensus, that they lost the ability to do anything else. They're trapped by their own code.
It means you can't just talk it out. You can't negotiate with an operating system.
You can only try to patch it, or you watch it crash.
And that leads us to the final provocative questions from the sources. And they are. They're uncomfortable, but I think they're the right questions.
They are, and I think everyone listening should really sit with them for a minute.
The first one is for the promotion race countries.
Yeah. How does a system built entirely on winning handle the moment there are no more winners? When growth just stops, mathematically, physically stops, what replaces that legitimacy?
If the engine runs on more, what happens when you get to enough?
It's an existential void.
And then for the West, for the U.S., in a world where the U.S. treats markets as conditional, building those fences, and China treats growth as survival, where does personal freedom retreat to?
That's the one that keeps me up. If the state becomes a full-time boundary manager, do we all just end up living inside the fence? We assume freedom was the default setting, but maybe the freedom of the last 30 years was just a feature of a specific market OS that's now being patched.
And finally, the question of collapse. Everyone is obsessed with the big boom.
But the sources ask a much better, more realistic question. How much friction will the world have to absorb as these systems just try to stay alive?
It's not about the end of the world. It's about the maintenance cost.
The cost of keeping the gears turning when they don't fit together anymore, and that cost is paid in inflation, in tension, in inefficiency.
Well, that is a lot to process.
Mm.
I feel like I need to go stare at a wall for a bit.
It's heavy stuff, but it's better to see the machine for what it is than to pretend it's all magic.
Absolutely. This wasn't the usual geopolitical update, but I feel like I understand the headlines a lot better now. It's not just noise, it's the sound of the engines.
It's all about the operating system.
Thanks for listening to this deep dive. We'll be back next time with another stack of sources. Until then, keep looking at the machinery.